Thank you all for taking a little break in these crazy days to go on this little adventure with me. But I've been having a lot of both kind of peer conversations, also with a lot of you guys, my team, friends, and kind of the overwhelming common bond we all have is an immense amount of stress right now. And I kept hearing conversations or comments that came up that kind of started with, can you believe, or just especially in dealing with other folks that are in leadership positions, kind of confused over certain responses and reactions that they were getting out of their teams. And not only that, but just also in our personal relationships and dealing with our family, dealing with other folks. Extreme stress causes extreme behaviors, and it actually has changes in your psychological conditioning and impacts pretty much everything in our life. So thinking about that, it just kind of took me back to, of course, probably, I can't imagine there's a whole lot more stressful than going through combat, but it took me kind of back to my days in the military and understanding military leadership, and especially during combat times, and the changes that I saw in my guys. So it gave me the idea of putting this together. I wanted to share it with everyone because I think it's some good information that we can all take something away from. And if nothing else, just getting back to the fundamentals of key leadership and understanding how to motivate others and drive on, continue the mission so that we can all still be successful in the end of this thing. So it's the big thing that, as I wait for the slide to react, there we go. Leadership in good times, especially as the great times we've experienced in the last few years, day-to-day decisions that leaders make, for the most part, go unnoticed. There's a lot of effort that's done at the top to spin up policies and procedures and exercises, whatever the things may be. And most of your lower level leadership, whether it be your property manager, whoever, they feel like they're making a lot of the decision making, from day to day, and they're doing a lot of the operational impact of whatever that job may be. And quite often, the efforts that are done at the top levels of leadership, a lot of folks kind of sit around like, what is going on up there? It's behind the scenes. It's kind of the Wizard of Oz type stuff. But today, in the midst of everything that's going on, it's now when those positions of leadership are really looked at with kind of the most critical eye. And just one thing I'll put in: every word, every action, every step you take, and this is really key and critical, every step you don't take is amplified and projected to everyone that's following you. So a big question I have is, how then do we provide answers when there are so few available? And the bottom line that I'm going to keep echoing this is, success comes down to controlling what you can and managing what you can't. We often will say, control what you can and, don't worry about the other stuff. We can't not worry about the things that we can't control. We got to find ways that we can manage it. So my life before multifamily, I came into the multifamily industry after a career in the military. I didn't even know the word multifamily existed. What I did know was standardization, strategic decision-making, and leadership. And I quickly recognized that the military's mission and execution paralleled corporate operational leadership and personnel management kind of in the same way. So what I'd like to do is really kind of unpack those connections, that parallel between the military's mission and execution with our corporate operational leadership and personnel management. So military planning and execution. In mission planning in the military, especially in combat, execution tends to look quite different than is anticipated. This kind of goes back to the previous slide about, not knowing the answers, what are we going to do? So even though the execution may look different than what was anticipated, the outcome really, for the most part, stayed very close to what was expected. How in the world can we meet expectations when we clearly miss what was anticipated? And there's no real top secret solution to this mystery. The answer comes down to a fundamental component of leadership, and that's managing what you can control. In the military, the foundation of successful leadership is all about discipline and maintaining fundamentals that have been constantly and consistently drilled from the very beginnings of basic training. I was as a small unit leader. So my role, I was in a mechanized infantry unit. I was our squad leader, was also our platoon sniper. But as a small unit leader of an infantry unit, drilling the basics would be the defining difference between success and failure. Or in what we were doing, it came down to life and death. We have no control over the actions that confront us. So, we have no control over our opposition force or enemy, whatever they're doing. But what we do have control of is the reaction or response to those actions. And therein lies the critical importance of personal discipline and well-structured standard operating procedures. Controlling or managing those reactions is the cornerstone for continued success, even the most challenging at times. So it comes down to mastering the fundamentals, and for the military is mission and execution. Today, some of those rules have changed as far as how we operate. However, fundamentally, they're really the same. So how can so much change but so much be the same? And when it comes down to like military, now it's multifamily. Like what we do in multifamily, and kind of where I got into when I got in the multifamily environment as a regional property manager dealing with the portfolio that I managed, the primary objectives are the same. It's asset management. It's maximizing the potential ROI for owners and delivering safe, sanitary, decent housing at the highest level of resident satisfaction. For now, what I do from a supplier standpoint, we're all focused on providing supplies or services as needed to satisfy our customers' needs. So those things haven't changed in spite of our environment and what we're operating, or the way we're operating has changed quite a bit. So where does it all start? And the guiding light for all decision-making within an organization is the mission statement. It's the building block for the company and its team. For all missions in the military, no matter if it was training or actual combat, the commanding officer would initially issue a commander's intent. And like a mission statement, all planning and decision-making would point directly to that intent. Inevitably, due to whatever uncontrollable forces, the painstaking plans that our leaders poured over to and then disseminated and then we rehearsed, they'd be rendered mostly useless at the point of first contact from whatever opposition we hit. So in other words, we'd spend hours, days, sometimes weeks planning a mission that, within 2 hours of starting that mission that could have been planned to be executed over a matter of a day or 5, 6, 7 hours, within the first 10% of that mission, as soon as something would happen to kind of blow the planning of that mission apart completely. So, but only through individual ownership and pushing down that commander's intent to the lowest of enlisted personnel, and making sure they fully understood their role in achieving the primary objective, could we drive on with the mission and still ultimately secure success with that mission? Well, your corporate mission statement needs to carry that same power. If the current conditions we are all experiencing are surpassing the functional capacity of your mission statement or corporate goals, then you've got to consider reevaluating those critical items. And more than ever, we got to keep it simple. Solid operating procedures, SOPs, are vital to operational success. And it's how you avoid confusion by working to simplify as much as possible. Clear, concise instructions are critical. For us in the military, as an infantryman, Army infantry unit specifically, regardless of location, division, brigade, battalion, etc., they all follow the same standard operational guidelines we called battle drills. They were our basic battle drills. Whenever we had, if we were sitting still for 30 minutes, our squad leaders were engaging our guys to, hey, let's practice some battle drills. And there's a list. And you could, if I could find somebody on this call who was also in infantry somewhere else at a different year, different time, it would all look just about the same. And that's how you break things down at such a fundamental level and then constantly reinforce them. And that's how you build the standards that you don't have to worry about how it gets executed. That constant reinforcement builds it to where it gives the confidence to the leaders and the team members that everyone knows their job, and everyone knows that everyone has a faith and trust in what the immediate reaction and response is to that opposition contact. And our success was completely dependent on that confidence. So how can you guys as leaders simplify your processes so that your teams are successful and they understand and they know the process that they're responsible for? How can you simplify your message to ensure that it's accurately received? And another question is, can you immediately measure that accuracy? That's critically important. It's not only can we project our goals, can we project what our mission is, can we benchmark that projection and then understand and then measure our stair steps up to those successful points. So let's talk about execution. So that was the mission side. This is the execution side. And I'm gonna draw the parallel of execution, and that's our asset management. And when asset management, I'm not talking about the property management part of asset management. I want to talk about our greatest asset that we have at our disposal, which is our people. So everyone on the call, you guys have most likely are in some leadership capacity in one way or another. So you guys have proven your value and fluency as leaders, and that's driving your teams and companies above and beyond established goals year after year. So right now, your skills as leaders are being put to the test in ways previously unimaginable. For me, I joined a peacetime military. I enlisted the summer before my junior year of college. When I got into the military, out of the gate, going into the infantry, it's kind of advertised that this is a harder basic training than the usual Army stuff, which I was coming from playing college football. That stuff was actually really exciting to me. So, but getting in and basic training was the basic stuff, and it got harder the further in you went. But as you get to your units, we train tirelessly, pushing mental and physical limits, all in combat simulation, because that's all we had at the time. The simulation was based on an unknown enemy, but we were maximizing our opportunities to train for the potential of actual warfare. We trained hard, carried a lot of confidence in our skills as warriors. And then early in 2004, that training would be put to test as we were now called to enter that fight and continue the fight that started in 2003 with Operation Iraqi Freedom. As we started back up 6 months before that, we started ramping up our training. I could already start to see the changes within my teammates. The stress of the pending deployment, the stress of being away from homes and families, the stress of the unknown was all taking its toll and impacting the psychology and physiology of the men that I served with. Reactions and responses were inconsistent. These are people that I'd trained with for years, and now over the period of a couple months, you could start to see some fundamental differences in how they were reacting and responding to things. Those inconsistencies threatened to erode the confidence that we had built in the training, in the standards that we had worked so hard to put in place. Fast forward that to performing actual combat missions in a real combat zone, and those changes and inconsistencies were even more amplified. But getting overseas into the box, as we called it, your unit's your unit. It's up to you as a leader to fix the problems. You got to adapt and move on, or Charlie Mike, as we call it, continue mission. So we overcame those challenges, and we only did it through strong leadership and improved teamwork. Ultimately, we were motivated by, we didn't really have a choice. We had a mission to do. It's not like you could call in sick or take a vacation day. So we didn't have a choice, and ultimately it's about the will to survive. We adapted to our environment and learned new ways to be efficient and effective. And that's exactly where you are with your teams today. A stress and anxiety that they and we are all under is making real changes in all of us. You got to know this. It is real. We all feel and deal with stress in different and unique ways. Empathy is king in this, and managing the aspect of your asset management. It's not about how you feel, it's about how they feel and why. Fear is incredibly powerful, and it's mostly rooted in the unknown. A closed door between my objective and me was the most terrifying moment that I had to endure in combat. There were a lot of doors, But 4 things allowed me to overcome those fears, push forward, and secure my objective. 3 of them being mission, teamwork, and training. But most importantly was having God as my sword and my shield of protection all along. I didn't have a choice of whether or not I could open the door. I had to secure the objective on the other side and eliminate any potential threats. So my team and the years of training we all had behind me, or they were behind me. So without hesitation, I violently kicked that door in. It's just as terrifying to give the order for someone else to kick the door in. That's putting someone else's health and well-being on the line for the success of the mission. And as leaders, that's exactly what we're called to do. We've already proven our capacity to do the kicking. Our organizations are counting on us to expand on our own capacity and create that same drive and determination across multiple teams. So you're maximizing your influence and you're taking your experience that you've developed and expanding that into your team and making them an extension of you. And then when your teams are ready to do the kicking, that's you effectively leading. So there's 4 keys to winning as a leader: communication, collaboration, motivation, evaluation. Communication. For those of you that have known me for any period of time, I harp on communication constantly. It's you know, as we were operating in any operations we did in the military, we have what's called an after action review. And it's, we come together after the, whatever the mission is, you come together with leadership and you kind of discuss, you know, overall, you give a report card of the mission. What went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve on, what can we sustain? And so the kind of the big joke would always be, you wanted a race to raise your hand because it's all about you had to contribute something. So whoever was the first to raise their hand to say communication, you kind of got the easy one out of the bag because it's something that can always be improved upon. But information, especially now, is extremely vital. And in the absence of information, there's always misinformation. And you can't over communicate, especially the misinformation can come from any source, whether it's researching online or looking through articles in paper, or heck, it's just a conversation or something you overhear in the hallway. It's all around you. So because of that, you cannot over communicate in an environment like this, and build a communication plan that fits. And I give you an easy acronym here. So the F is for frequency. More is better, and repetition is the key. So you guys can't all raise your hand, but raise your hand if you're a bad communicator. And when I do this in groups, there's not that many people that raise their hand that they're a bad communicator. But how many of us constantly find ourselves using, like, how do they not understand what I'm saying? Whether it's with your kids, with your spouses, with your coworkers, whatever, we all feel like we're a good communicator. But good communication has nothing to do with how well you present the information. It has everything to do with how well it's received. And frequency, giving information over and over again, is really how we learn and how we understand, and how it becomes ingrained into part of our, whether it's like our DNA. So giving small bits of information frequently, and also, you know, that goes to the information, the part of it. The small pieces make it easier to digest and then verify. The verify portion is ask for feedback. Ask questions so that you know and confirm that the person that you're delivering the information to understands the information you're trying to deliver. Just because you say it in a certain way doesn't mean it's going to be received in that way. Especially with nonverbal forms of communication that we have. I'm sure no one else here has read a text or read an email and taken the tone of that person, whoever's delivering it or sending it, or even if you send it yourself, the tone getting misinterpreted, so then there becomes a misunderstanding of what the email is about. And that goes to type. And share your communication across various platforms and methods. This is going to help as the variety of teams that you, or the variety of people that you manage in your teams. It helps them because everyone learns in a different way. But it also will help the frequency and the information part, so that the repetition comes in, that you, hey, I shared it to you, I texted you, then I sent an email follow-up, or whatever the method is. Make sure you share it across various forms of communication. Collaboration. Encourage your input and feedback from your teams. One of the things that's real important here is value and purpose. It's essential right now as you read these certain things of folks, the amount of depression that's kind of hitting a lot of the folks globally right now. It's the term we're telling people you have to isolate. Well, isolate now is for your health. Well, in the past, isolation was considered unhealthy, and we wanted people to not stay isolated. So understanding that as people are isolated, they feel removed from the things that were important before, so it takes away some of their sense of importance. So collaborating with your teams and open up more of a democratic type of leadership can be very helpful. Establish small groups of key personnel so they can work on specific tasks. If you have, especially with everything that's different, if you're coming up with different policies or procedures, set up small task forces or small teams that you can have within your group to help work on some of these things, because they have a different perspective than you're going to have as a leader. And that perspective is really important. But having a clear sense of purpose and value is critical in combating these feelings of isolation and helplessness. And so let's get to a big one, which is the big mo, and that's motivation. So leadership's essentially motivating others to do what you need done. Leadership and motivation are a lot like yoga pants. Sure, they can stretch a lot, but they're definitely not one size fits all. They and you must be flexible and meet the specific needs of your team. It's balancing the appropriate amount of push versus pull, especially in our current environments. Empathy and consideration are more essential than ever. Try to establish a firm boundary between professional and private. But today's changing work landscape is literally blending those lives together more than ever. Take the opportunity to connect personally with your teams. And this is something that I've used. A lot of you have heard this. You know about building the sandwich. This is really important in how you give feedback to your teammates and your followers. Focus attention on individual accomplishments and offer specific feedback. Focus on the fundamentals of the fundamental standards of your business and work quickly with any needed corrections, staying engaged with your teams and making smaller corrections as needed so that you can promote a greater sense of teamwork up and down the chain. If you see something or if you notice something is going in a direction different than what you want it to go on, act immediately, but be careful in how you act. And that's where the sandwich comes in, the good, bad, good, or the good, what's the correction that you need, and then the following is gratitude and being grateful for that person and what they provide to the team. Offer that sandwich so that you're sandwiching the fix in the middle, but you're reinforcing that, hey, you're doing a great job and I really appreciate everything you do. I couldn't do my job without you. Because in the end, ultimately, remember who's carrying who. Be the coach. Don't just scream from the sidelines. Get in the fight. Get your hands dirty. Walk their walk. Walk your talk. Be present. Provide honest and positive feedback. And let your team know that you value them, and they will continue to perform for you. Last piece of this one is evaluation. Constantly evaluate your communications and operations to determine their effectiveness. Evaluate your teams to identify changes to their performance, production, or their personalities. And this evaluation is it's not a quarterly or biannual. It's a constant process that you're looking at so that you're making sure that you're effective in the information and the things that you're delivering. So an evaluation is simply, it's as much as you send an email out of a lot of information detailing steps of things that you need to be done, follow up with, have another key personnel that you can follow up with and call, hey, was I clear in that, in those instructions and understanding? Do you understand where I'm coming from and what's expected? Yes or no? If it's a no, then it's a great opportunity. You can go back and revisit it. If one person's confused, there's a good chance multiple, folks in your team are confused. But a big thing in this evaluation, beyond evaluating your team, is evaluating yourself. self or peer evaluation, because your health is just as critical to the team as the team's health. When a leader goes down, there's an immense amount of pressure and further stress that flows downstream onto the team. And no one's immune to stress. Check in with colleagues, friends, family, etc., and request feedback from their perspective about you. Don't get lost in constant work. Make plans that work, execute, and evaluate. Also, plan your rest. Dedicate time each day to disconnect and focus on your personal health and well-being. The healthier you are, the more effective you'll be. Stay alert, stay focused, and energized, and just carry your part. Know and understand your limits. You're the leader of a team. If you could truly handle it all, there'd be no team and ultimately no need for a leader. And I'll say it again, control what you can control. I'm gonna give you guys a good example of kind of the shakeup and why leadership and consistency across leadership and understanding mission so critical. Following my deployment in Iraq, coming back to civilian life was seemingly easy. No weapons to carry, no equipment to carry, not living on constant alert, no imminent threat. Transition came, but I was still different. I was still carrying an immense amount of anger over really having my life so intensely interrupted. I missed almost all the first 16 months of my first kid, not understanding or feeling any value to the loss of time and lives in a foreign country that carried little true significance. I really didn't, as far as mission, I really never gained a full understanding of what our mission was in Iraq. And no one took the opportunity to really clarify it. I wasn't outwardly angry when I got back, but I definitely carried it. We all have a set capacity for what we can carry, and holding on to additional stress limits our capacity to manage other issues that we come across daily. But it wasn't until, a year or so after coming home from Iraq that I finally surrendered it all to God, saying I is actually incorrect. He chased me down and forced me to surrender. It actually came one morning way to work, and it overwhelmed me so much I had to pull off onto the side of Brown Boulevard in Greensboro. It was that moment when I surrendered to the understanding that God had me in all those moments, that it really wasn't none of it was about me or because of me or from me. And after that moment, my anger and anxiety were replaced with love and comfort. And my place, my position, my mission at that point became very clear. So it's really about understanding about, how much can you carry? And just carry what you're supposed to. Be considerate of what others are capable of carrying. This past weekend sermon, my pastor Andrew gave an awesome analogy that's very appropriate. If I see a weight on the ground, just because, I see something 300, 350 pounds, I think that's easy to pick up. For somebody else, that's an impossibly daunting task. And that's kind of where we are in life right now. Some things are going to be kind of easy to us and make a lot of sense, but to someone else, it might be the most terrifying thing ever. And we have to respect that as leaders. And our job is not to push them through it necessarily. Sometimes it's to pull them through it, or sometimes it's help them around that obstacle. But what can we do to motivate them or encourage them to keep them optimistic and positive, to understand that, hey, we're going to get through this thing together. Let's just make some modifications and take care of what we can take care of to get to the end. So success over stress ultimately comes down to, again, working to control what you can, but manage what you can. You don't have to know how this thing's going to end. You just have to know your mission, know your team, and trust your execution. So what questions do you guys have? Thank you so much for letting me spill on for so long, but what questions do you guys have?
Bert, I have a quick question for you. You were talking about evaluation, of our team members in here. I mean, do you have any suggestions as far as, like, if you have that challenging employee or team member, maybe that, just seems like they keep using excuses to not work, or they're using the situation as excuse to not work. Do you have any like advice for us that how we can get them motivated and moving in the right direction?
Absolutely. Great question. So when you have challenging employees, first you've got to assess whether or not, are they legitimately anxious or fearful over current state, or are they just trying to get by? A lot of ways, the reaction, your response to it isn't going to be that different. Or fear is real. So even though it may seem silly or insignificant to you, it could still be exceptionally stressful for that individual. You don't know what they're already carrying. You don't know how full their bucket is already from the stress in their lives. So the best thing you can do is, if someone's really causing some issues, or they're standing in the way and they're kind of an obstacle to the team's success, in a very tactful way, just remove them from the environment. Either encourage them to take some time off, or almost demand that they take some time off. Give them an opportunity to kind of regroup and reconsolidate their thoughts and understanding, and hopefully redirect it to a way that's a little more positive. We've got several, if you want to engage HR, we've got the employee assistance program. There's several ways that you can kind of help get some counseling back to that individual, but spend some time with them one-on-one, hear them, ask them, what their main issues are. And so then, as they respond and give you greater detail of what the issue is, you can better determine how your response should be. But most likely it's going to be, let's get this person away. Let's get them some time to recenter, refocus, and then hopefully they can re-engage at some point. But big caution is be very careful about pushing. Pushing in this time, and if someone is hesitant, or you feel them pulling back away from the team, you could push them in a way that ends up becoming even more detrimental to the team. So just be very kind of acknowledge their concerns, and just hear them out, and get other opinions, whether it's from HR or another leader that you can get to engage them and kind of bend their ear. Good question.
Okay, I got one more question. If I can, I know we're running a little bit over time, but can I ask one more question?
Sure.
On the flip side of the employee, how about is the leader, when you start to feel so overwhelmed because you're doing, but there still feels like there's so much that needs to be done. And this isn't just coming from a leadership standpoint of I'm overseeing people, but even it may be your family members or your friends, that you seem to be the one that holds it all together for them, and you're just feeling overwhelmed, and you need that motivation or something. I don't know. To help you get the rest of everything that needs to be done. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah. And so when you personally start to feel overwhelmed, and it's a lot of it is the same solutions that I gave in regards to the employee. And as I stated earlier, it's about disconnecting. Even there's been one perfect being that's walked this earth, Jesus Christ. And there were times that he became overwhelmed and stressed out when, in the mission that he had in his short time here on earth. And that's the model I follow. And there would be times that he would disconnect. He would get away from the crowds. He would get away from the groups. He would go out into the boat, into the middle of the lake. He would climb the mountain by himself. So that was his opportunity to be closer to God, and he could better hear. And then re-energize himself. And I do a lot of that myself, and it's planning that time to disconnect. And why it's important to plan that time now before you become overwhelmed, because when you're overwhelmed, it's harder to have the personal discipline to take those steps away, because as you as we get overwhelmed, we feel like, well, we can just work our way out of it. And you're digging a deeper hole for yourself that just making it harder and harder for you to climb out of. So having the discipline to plan time to disconnect every day, whether it's a meditation time, prayer time, exercise, even just conversations with friends, have some time that's not dedicated to what it is you get paid professionally to do. But it's be aware of your surroundings and take feedback from others, so that when you can't recognize it in yourself, trust someone else to recognize it in you, and then take those breaks as needed. Well, if there's no other questions, guys, stay tuned for these. Chattable Supply, we're doing these virtual lunches as often as we can right now. I think we've got them planned for Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Are happening at noon. We're sharing the recording after. So please feel free to share these around or come back later and tune into them if there's a piece that you missed. My information, it's bert.ray@Chattable Supply. If you've got any questions, you can hit me up with an email. Otherwise, you guys stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Have a great day.